Welcome, everyone. So, today we are going to discuss a very interesting topic, adapting MCP for business adoption. As many of you may already know, utilizing MCP for building AI-driven business applications have now become a trend. And to educate us more on this subject, we have Kalana Wijesekara, who's the Chief Developer Experience Officer at 99X. So Kalana has worked closely with all of our 9NX product engineering teams in adapting AI to enhance both developer experience and product features as well. So without further ado, Kalana, over to you.
Thanks, Suren. Thanks for that kind introduction. Like Suren mentioned, the topic for today is adapting MCP for business applications. Today's session, we will keep it relevant for both the business audience as well as tech audience. So that's the plan for today. So in this session, what I plan to cover is I will give you a quick introduction to MCP, and then we will explore the interesting question of should the business applications adapt MCP. After that, we will look at if we are adapting MCP for business applications, what's the business and technical approaches that we can take. And finally, we'll talk about few architectural concerns that are specific to MCP. So with that goal set, let's take a look at MCP and what it is and what it solves. So lately we have been seeing high popularity in LLM-powered applications. And for these LLM-powered applications, for them to be useful, they actually need to use other useful systems. Let's take an example. Think of an LLM-powered personal assistant that will help you with your daily routine, for example. So that application probably will have to talk to your calendar application to figure out what your day look like, and should have the capabilities of scheduling an event there, or else it should be able to look at an upcoming event and talk to your maybe the ride hailing application, talk to your Uber and book a ride for you so that you can make it for that meeting. But then the question comes, how do these applications talk to each other? Well, we can as application builders, we can figure out our own ways to talk to each of these different applications, but that's gonna be complicated and tedious very soon. So to solve that problem, there are of course multiple ways. In late 2024, Anthropic introduced MCP, Model Context Protocol, as a standard way of these systems talking to each other, finding what they can do and how to collaborate. So it's basically a solution for the problem of collaboration between LLM-powered applications and other systems that can provide useful functionalities for these LLM-powered applications. So since the introduction of MCP, MCP has been gaining a lot of popularity and has kind of become the de facto almost way of implementing these capabilities into the systems that I talked about. So if you are curious how MCP actually works, if a system wants to expose its capabilities, it would feature an MCP server. And then to communicate with this MCP server, you would need an MCP client, which will be part of, or which is to be able to be consumed or used by an LLM-powered application. So if you bundle these together, the LLM-powered application and the MCP client, we call it an MCP host. So this MCP host is able to look at what kind of capabilities that the system can offer, through the MCP server. So how the MCP server do this is basically it exposes three things. In MCP spec, we call these primitives. So MCP server exposes tools, prompts, and resources. Tools are basically actions or capabilities that this system can offer. Prompts are prompt templates that an MCP client and the users of an MCP client can use to effectively communicate with this server. And resources are some of the data that can be exposed for the client for better collaboration. And likewise, MCP client also exposes some of these capabilities or primitives, we call them, namely sampling, roots, and elicitation. But since we are getting into a lot of technical details, we'll stop that discussion a bit there, and then we'll jump into our question of should business applications adapt MCP? Well, if you look at business applications conventionally, like the application that we had all this time, they solve some really important problems for us as human users, usually through an user interface. And the features that they offer are sometimes or more catered towards this user interface. But even the features that doesn't have a user interface is predominantly aimed at a user journey a human user would do, right? But things are changing today with the rise of LLM technology and AI. We have a type of application where a human user can give a task or a goal and let the application find the best way to achieve this by carrying out certain steps, reasoning how to solve this problem, and do that activity by the application itself. And other than that, we also see the rise of AI agents, where an AI agent gets a job or a goal to achieve, and autonomously carries out a plan to get the job done. So the question is, we have a business application. Do we need to offer our services to these new users as well? If we need to do that, then an approach that we can take is enable our business applications with MCP so that these new users that I talked about are able to talk to our business application through MCP protocol and consume our services. So in a gist, this allows our business application to participate in the agentic world. So well, that sounds interesting. So let's talk a bit more about it, how it actually works. So in a typical agentic ecosystem, we would not have one MCP capable application to offer services. We will have multiple, and each of these applications will offer what it can do through tools, prompts, and resources. So an agent can or an LLM-enabled application can discover what kind of services each of these applications offer and reach out to them. Hey, I want to get this done. Oh, I see that you have this capability and I will make use of it. So it would selectively, when it requires, based on the plan it created, based on the activity it want to achieve, it would consume these services offered by the MCP capable applications. I can give you an example to understand this bit better. This example comes a bit closer to home. So at 99X, we have this agent implemented for prospecting. So this agent has the criteria of type of prospects that we're looking for and where to look for. and it does its research and compiles information and emails it um, with our sales team for the action. So, but of course, it shouldn't stop there. We can make this a lot better. Imagine this AI agent can talk to our CRM application and look at different prospects where they are, add new prospects, enrich the data that we have on the prospects, even go ahead and try to create what's required for collateral and so on. So no, that sounds good, but if well, let's think about what does that mean for the CRM system developer, the company who develops the CRM. For them to participate in this ecosystem, their system needs to support MCP. Actually, now they do. If you'd been like checking out the news, who adapts MCP recently would have noticed CRM applications like Microsoft Dynamics and HubSpot. They started supporting the applications with MCP so that LLM applications or agentic applications can make use of it. So I think that gives you an idea why a business application could or should support MCP and what kind of opportunities it will get by doing so. And on a lighter note, whenever you watch sci-fi movies and whenever AI goes rogue and start doing all these evil things with different systems, you might have thought, there's no way this AI can talk to all these systems. Well, that is changing a bit now. All right. So now we'll go into adapting MCP to your business application. So first we'll talk about the business approach, and then we'll take a look at how we are going to address this in a technical manner. Well, it's most likely you already have a successful business application which solves a lot of good problems for your customers. Well, if you have an existing applications, one thing that you can do is enable your existing features with MCP. So you are basically exposing some of the existing features through MCP technology. So it doesn't make sense that we expose all our APIs through MCP because it has to be the features that is useful in a MCP context. So in that process, you'll have to think who would be the users, what kind of use cases will be there, and then you map it to your existing features, and then you would explore what features to be exposed. The other approach is we go MCP first. So if you think about your application, it has evolved, but it has evolved in an world where people interact with computers to solve problems. So most of your features are built for interfaces and human users interacting with computers. But it doesn't have to be that way. You have a strong business domain and you have a strong capability of solving business problems. So you can think how to offer that problem solving in an MCP first world. If you think of your users as AI agents or LLM capable applications, what kind of interactions that your business can offer for them so that you can create a brand new value proposition rather than exposing your existing features. So these are the two approaches that I see if you want to look at offering your business strength or problem solving strengths with MCP. Well, having discussed that, next I take you through the technical approach. Well, I'd like to take you through few conceptual differences. between a typical integration and MCP. For a typical integration, we can imagine something like REST API, which your product would already feature. So, but of course, one thing that we need to think right now is with MCP, we are of course not trying to replace an existing integration or existing REST API capability or something like that. MCP would be an enhancement or additional offering on top of the way that you're offering your product. It will not be an replacement. So that's one small remark I want to make. So let's look at these differences. Well, if you take a look at a REST API, the consumer and the person, the system that offers the REST API, this usage of API is planned at the design time. We look at the API, and the developer who consume the API would, build it at the design time. In comparison with MCP, this usage is actually decided at the runtime. Your MCP, the application that consumes the MCP powered service will decide when to consume it. We'll explore what are the services out there to consume, and plan the usage or consumption accordingly. So that's one clear difference that we see between these two. And another thing that I find interesting is the communication between a REST API and a REST client is based on a pre-agreed contract. For example, if you server is changing the API, you are releasing REST API version 2, your client has to adapt to it. But if you think of MCP, this relationship is a bit more loose because your client will be exploring and figuring out the capabilities at runtime. This client-server relationship can evolve a bit more freely within an ecosystem. And another difference that I like to talk about is the steps that occur between a client and the server. So in a typical REST API, if you want to get something done, you will have very clearly determined set of steps. So based on this, you will do your procedure calling. You will get certain resource and look at it, and based on it, you'll make an edit call on top of that resource, likewise. But with MCP, the procedure calling is it's more objective driven. The client will have a goal to achieve, and it will invoke the MCP functions in a manner which is not predetermined. It might do it in different ways each time it tries to do so. So there are some conceptual differences here, and these actually have implications to various things that comes afterwards, like how we handle things technically, as well as different architectural concerns. So we'll go into technical approach in terms of implementing this on your existing product. So one way that you can do is you have your existing API, which is backed by a data source. You can expose an MCP server which consumes the same existing API and provide a specific MCP related function to whoever the clients who want to consume. So this is one approach to expose that. And then you'll have to consider things like this communication, which could happen through HTTP. And of course, in later we'll discuss like we should worry about authentication, security, and things like that. For you to take this approach, your API should be quite granular, and this MCP server should be able to build useful functionality on top of this API. Or else, if your API is not that sort of state, you can use your existing API layer, and you can have that embedded and have this artifact deployed as one artifact. So that's another way to approach this technically. And also, especially if you want to go MCP first, and the capabilities that you want to expose are not in your current service layer, you can go into creating specific service layer which will support your MCP capabilities. Right. So then, of course, each of these topics are areas that we can go into a lot of more detail, but maybe we'll keep that for a different webinar. So let's take through few architectural concerns that are very specific to MCP. And when we think about these architectural concerns, we have to consider in both MCP client implementation and server implementation, and of course the MCP host um, and the service backed by the MCP server has also quite a bit of responsibility in handling these concerns. So the ones that I want to highlight are security, privacy, things about usage and costing, and performance. So thinking about security and privacy, because MCP involves as a separate layer and it acts sort of as a proxy to other services, we have issues or concerns that we have to handle in terms of security. Um, there are multiple, I mean, you can use provisions and recommendations provided by OAuth to implement these, but there are obvious things that we need to avoid, basically because of the nature of this architecture. So you will have to implement ways to mitigate risks um, by following the best practices. These will avoid things like token pass-through. So this is when happens if your client has a token, valid token, and if your server passes this through as is, then there it creates a vulnerability. So likewise, there's possibility for session hijacking, and you might have already heard about the confused deputy problem. So these are known issues that can occur, which we can, of course, mitigate by following the good practices. And on top of that, we can also be very aware about the increased attack surface because it's very easy that we configure these clients to have much more larger permission scope. Um, and there's also risk of prompt injection at different places because these hosts will be carrying out tasks based on its own planning. So security and privacy are very important concerns. And the next set of architectural concerns that I want to cover is regarding usage and costing. This is an important topic because it's an interesting topic because like we discussed previously, the interactions to an MCP server, the steps will not be predetermined. To achieve the same goal, an MCP client can call an MCP server multiple times, not the same number of times that you think before. So because of this, if you are to establish a certain costing and usage sort of plans, you'll have to be aware that some of these parameters will be much more variable than you would have in a typical API that you would architect. And another concern that we can think of is the performance. So because MCP is a protocol that depends on discovery, of course, it comes with a cost of discovery. So when you are implementing certain use cases, you will have to account for these performance cost in terms of cost of discovery as well as in the other touch points. And of course, you can use certain things like context caching to overcome this. But my point is there are certain concerns which are much more important in MCP context than if you are architecting another API that you use to do so. With these concerns covered in a short time that we discussed so far, I'd like to give you some pointers where to go from now. Well, if MCP seems something interesting for your business application, I think one thing that you can do is you can reimagine how your business application would participate in an agentic world. And then you can also look at the existing capabilities and what can you expose as MCP. And this is really easy if you expose them internally within the organization, because you can worry less about the trial and error concerns. And of course, think about the technical and architectural approach. And if you want to get started, the MCP official site has some quick starters. So you can just go in and start adapting, and you can get a server up and running probably in half an hour to 1 hour's time. All right. I think it's a lot of different topics we wanted to put into this session. So you might have some questions you want to dig into, so we can look at any questions that you have.
Yes. So I thank you for that great session, Kala. I would like to invite the audience to post any questions you might have in the Q&A section of the webinar. While our audience gear up for their questions, I would like to ask a question, Kala. This RAG, Retrieval-Augmented Generation, has been a popular way that people have been using to enhance the knowledge and context of LLMs when they kind of use them in their applications. So how is MCP different from RAG?
Yeah. So I think uh, they are different in both the purpose that they're built for as well as the implementation. So I think in terms of purpose, what I see is RAG is built more to provide a bit more context into a query that goes into an LLM, so that it can ground the answers to specific knowledge. Whereas MCP, we can actually kind of hack it to get the same capability, but it has a bit more capability in terms of providing actions, providing actionable tools to an LLM-powered application. So that's the key difference in that I see in terms of purpose and the usage.
All right. So does that mean that within an when we implement a MCP server, it kind of covers the RAG part? Is that kind of
Not really. Like we can use an MCP to retrieve additional information that is
right?
useful for an question to be answered by an LLM, for example. But if
Right.
you can use RAG, you can specifically, like RAG has two processes, like two steps. One that happens at the runtime, and then one that happens part of RAG preparation that happens offline in advance. So in the RAG preparation, you can have more control over how the LLM system captures the information, so that it can add better context to the user's query to provide better answers. So that part, RAG has its own advantage because it's built for that purpose. But if you want to use MCP to retrieve some information, you can do that. But the main purpose of the MCP is not really that. That's
Okay.
how I see
Understood.
it.
Yeah. 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 Um, Another question I was thinking about while you were answering that is because I have seen MCP servers coming up, or I think all the main application vendors are daily sometimes releasing new MCP services. But how secure is it to kind of connect to MCP server? Because while there are some popular MCP servers out there, I think you mentioned a few things that are out there from Microsoft and other CRM, popular CRM vendors. But I see there are some lot of MCP servers coming up for things like GitHub and things that we day-to-day use, tools that we day-to-day use. And they're not published by any kind of vendor that we know, right? So anybody can create MCP server. So in that context, how careful should we be when connecting to MCP server?
I think we should be very careful, especially because in all of this context, MCP acts as a middleman between the system that we want to interact with and the tool that we are using. So if this MCP is a general purpose tool, or else if it doesn't belong to the actual vendor of the original product, it's very likely that one thing they might not take necessary steps to safeguard your data. And also, if they have a malicious intent, it's very, very easy for them to capture the data that is passed through, capture the credentials that's passed through, and even misuse the consent that you have given, and so on. So, in that sense, I think it's a very trending topic. So, it's very exciting to try out these tools coming up. But as users, I think we have to be very careful what MCP servers we adapt.
Yeah, very true. And we have a question from the audience. So I'll just read the question as it is. Hi, thank you for the insightful session about the MCP. So let's say that we only have APIs to expose to agents so that they can do action on behalf. If is it worth to design a MCP server to expose just APIs?
Yeah, if I understand the question correctly, yeah, is it worth to design an MCP server just to expose APIs? Yeah, so I think you may already have APIs exposed so that agents can consume them. But the problem there is then the agents would be consuming these APIs in a usually a vendor specific manner. Um, so what MCP solves is they remove um, the need for custom implementation to consume an API, but it provides a standard layer which interfaces between a consumer and a service provider so that these consumers and service providers can interact without having a, predetermined like a spec. So that interaction can be a bit more fluid. So I think to answer that question, if you are exposing an API for very specific agents, then and if you have very specific planned service offerings that you offer, then probably you might not need an MCP. But if the use cases that you offer exploratory in an agentic environment, agents can choose to consume your offerings, then I think it makes sense to expose them as MCP as well. That's how
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah, and exactly, and then if you expose the APIs through an MCP, you can get other agents to work with them as well. I guess that's a key advantage. Same like you can have a REST API which different clients can consume. So I think that's kind of the approach. All right. Since we don't have any more questions from audience, so thank you very much everyone for participating for today's webinar, and thank you, Kalana, for that insightful session. I hope everybody gained some very good understanding about MCP and how do you use adapt in MCP for business applications. And we'll see you again with another webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Al.